This was posted 2 days ago, so January 7th, from Paul Williams, and it says The Christian Dilemma, and that's probably too small for anybody to read. The God that Jesus was, a Christian perspective. Muslim. Can we blow it up? I'm sorry? Oh. Do. I'm supposed to just fill here. Well, we can't get it big enough to actually read. There, that's what I was looking for. Good. They don't need to see me. The God that Jesus was, a Christian perspective. Muslim, is Jesus God? Christian, yes, Jesus is God. Muslim, the book of Numbers 31 says to kill all women and infants and keep the little virgin girls for yourselves. Christian, yes, but that's the Old Testament and we follow the New Covenant because of Jesus. Muslim, is Jesus God? Christian, of course he is. Muslim, okay, so if Jesus is God, he must have been the same God in the Old Testament and is the one who gave the instructions to kill women and children and to take the little girls as sex slaves in your Bible. Yeah, well, now I've seen him utilize this a number of times at Speaker's Corner. And so I wanted to point out the many errors and problems with this kind of a incredibly simplistic and inappropriate argument. Muslim, is Jesus God? Yes, Jesus Christ is the second person of the Trinity. He is the Son incarnate. He is not the Father. He is not the Spirit, but he has eternally existed as God and became flesh. The book of Numbers 31 says to kill all women and infants and keep the little virgin girls for yourselves. Why are you going back, I wonder, to a text about God finally bringing judgment against the Midianites for what they had done in seeking to corrupt the worship of the Israelites back in Numbers chapter 25? You are aware that that's what's going on here, and that the words you're taking are from when Moses rebukes the people because they did not fulfill the commandment which was theirs. That they had only killed the men and they kept the women and children. And the whole point of Moses saying was, wait a minute, don't you remember what happened? The plague, the judgment that came upon us because the Midianites attempted to cause us to sin against God. And what had happened with Phinehas, remember the man took the woman into his tent and Phinehas goes in and skewers the both of them with the spear, and the plague is stopped from the people of Israel. And God said he was going to punish the Midianites, and now he does punish the Midianites. Don't you think any of that's relevant here? Unfortunately, the way that this is presented is it's an abuse of the historical context, the establishment of the people of Israel in the land, the extreme importance. Look, it's even more difficult, I think, to work through the text that says that even if the wife of your youth, your brother, secretly attempts to get you to worship a false god, you are to expose them and be the first person to toss the rock. That is how absolutely first in the thoughts of the people of Israel, their being the covenant people, is to be. There's to be no other god. And the Midianites were specifically and purposefully seeking to corrupt the people of Israel from the worship of Yahweh. Now, let me just ask, Mr. Williams, would God have the right to judge the Midianites? Could God have sent a plague amongst the Midianites to wipe them all out for their direct act of rebellion against him? If you say no, then we don't really have much of a ground for any further discussion. I don't think Muhammad would have said no. I think Muhammad would have said yes. Allah can destroy people for their sins. I mean, how many times is Sodom and Gomorrah mentioned in the Quran? And the just punishment upon those people. That's a question you have to ask. So this is a just punishment upon an evil people. And yet, there is extension of mercy to a small class of them. And you turn that into, well, that's a terrible thing. That's sex slaves. No, that would mean that if they were to take those women who had not lain with a man, then they have to protect them and they have to provide for them. So what you're saying is it would have been better to have killed them? I'm not sure what your argument is. But I would like to suggest that your argument is to utilize a text to create in a modern mind that is utterly ignorant of the ancient context such a revulsion that you can't think through what the real argument is. Now, of course, I was going to say that the representation of the Christian, yes, but that's the Old Testament. We follow the New Covenant because of Jesus. You know better than that. You went to a solid church. I know your old pastor and the people there. You went to a solid church, and you know it's a misrepresentation of meaningful biblical Christianity. But it ain't uncommon, unfortunately, for people to say that. So you know better, but you are at least representing, sadly, a number of people. And I know there are people involved in Muslim evangelism that just sort of go, don't worry about any of that Old Testament stuff. That was before the New Covenant, so it just doesn't matter anymore. That's not how the New Testament writers viewed it. That's for certain. But that's not in any way, shape, or form a meaningful representation of a sound understanding of the unity of the Old and New Testaments. But the main argument is all this. Could Jesus have commanded the destruction of the Midianites? Let me say something to anybody who's listening. If you say no, you've got the wrong Jesus. Oh, but he's so loving. And yes, giving of himself. Yeah, that's loving, and that is absolutely incredible. The condescension. But you see, you must understand that a sentimental Jesus is not the Jesus of the New Testament. When the Word became flesh, there is a purposefulness. There is a focus upon the glory of the triune God. There is so much that explains some of what seem to us to be odd statements of Jesus. They're not odd statements. They are consistent with the fact that he came for a purpose. And I want to remind everybody, because I remember hearing this. I remember when I first really started understanding these things as a young person. I was going to a Southern Baptist church, and we would have Bible study classes. And unfortunately, even back in the 1980s, small groups were very often, let's read a Bible passage and then we'll all talk about how we feel about it, which is not, that's not how we do it in Reformed Baptist churches. But, and I remember once I first got a handle on this, how often people would say, well, I'm awful glad we've got the loving God of the New Testament and not the angry God of the Old Testament. And especially once I got into seminary and studied church history and realized, wow, we're raising the Gnostics from the dead with that kind of an attitude. That is not biblical teaching. And in some of Jesus's parables, he talks about, it's pretty clear that the king involved there is himself, and they bring his enemies before him and execute them. And I've mentioned it many times before, but it's just one of the best examples. When you get to the book of Revelation, the Lamb stands as if slain. But he's called what? The Lion of the tribe of Judah. The whole point of the visionary aspect, the apocalyptic aspect of Revelation is to allow you to address complicated, deep things in symbolic language that helps to express all of it. And so when you see the lamb standing as if slain, well, lambs, if they're slain, aren't standing, but he's been resurrected, and so it's telling you more than one thing. But then he's called the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and you've got a lamb that is now a lion. And so there's a contradiction, but it's not a contradiction. It's just giving you a much more brilliant picture. And the same thing in Revelation chapter 6. As the judgment of God comes, and they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from what? The wrath of the Lamb. The wrath of the Lamb. Now, when you think of a cuddly little lamb, you don't think of wrath. But that's what these people are crying out for, is relief from the wrath of the Lamb. And I don't have, Mr. Williams' argument is absolutely meaningless to a biblically literate Orthodox Christian. Meaningless. As long as you recognize the full truth of who Jesus is. It's not a dilemma. It may be a misrepresentation, but it's not a dilemma.